What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to 3D Printing Sunday, formerly known as STL Sunday. The point of this series is we go through 3D modeling step by step and start with a project, try to finish it that night. Tonight, I'm going to do things a little bit different. Tonight, we're going to open Fusion 360 like we normally would, but tonight, I'm actually going to try and do more of a like if you've never opened Fusion before and you've never 3D modeled before, I'm going to try and break it down a little bit more this time and actually do something more along the lines of an actual how-to. Things that I'm, going through, telling you every command that I'm doing and the reason why I'm doing each thing. A little bit more simple than what we normally do. So if you're a little bit more used to 3D modeling, this is going to be a little bit slow for you. But if you're not, then maybe this will be something that is a little bit more helpful for you. So that's the reason that we're doing it. Hopefully, we'll see if everybody's checking in. Hopefully everything with the stream is going all right. We'll check. Let's see. My shelf is not crooked. That is simply an optical illusion. We've checked it on stream before. So anyway, what's going on, everybody? All right, looks like we're doing all right. Everything seems to be working. No one's complaining about audio levels. So we'll be able to jump right in. Again, we're going to be using Fusion 360. I'm going to switch to that view now. I guess evidently my other camera is just giving you a real good view of my shirt. So this secondary camera is almost pointless, but it's just to fill up a dead space in the screen. So that's why you get that. Anyway, Fusion 360, the reason we use this is you can download it for free and you can get a free license for it. It's a little bit difficult to navigate their way. They don't do a very good job of just putting it out there exactly how easy it is to get everything, or to get it for free. But nonetheless, it is possible, at least in the US. So this is Fusion 360. Once you install it, and open it up for the first time after you do any registration or creating an account, this is what you'll see. Now, we'll just kind of go through general what you're seeing on the screen before we really jump into doing a very simple project tonight. Up here at the top, you'll kind of see the typical menu bar, something you'll probably be fairly used to seeing in most applications. The first thing here is design menu. And if you drop that in, there's a number of these other areas. And these are things that are a little bit more in-depth. Design is where you're going to spend all of your time to actually create a new solid that you've never done before. Generative design is like taking and simulating forces, and it will kind of create something on its own. Kind of cool, but much more advanced. Render takes a model that you already have and then try and put photorealistic textures to it to make it look like a real picture. Animation, exactly like it sounds. You take something you've already drawn and you animate motion of some sort. Simulation, again, is trying to take and add forces and it'll show you weak points. Kind of cool. Again, a little bit further. Manufacturing is used for, like I draw something and then I use the manufacturing tab to write my tool paths to cut things out on my router. Or they also have integrated some 3D printing slicing into it. Again, these are not things that you're normally going to need right away. And then drawing is to be able to take like an object you made and make regular 2D drawings like you would print out. You could add dimensions, all that type of thing. Again, design is where we're going to spend our time. That's where you need to know most things. Then across the top, we've got a number of tools. We're going to talk about those kind of as we go through them more. And then above that, you'll see solid, surface, sheet metal, and tools. These are depending on the type of item you're trying to make. Solid is got most of what you need. Surface is like when you're trying to make like more organic models and meshes. It's a little bit different. So, and then sheet metal, like it sounds, it has design tools that are very focused on making things that are like a flat piece of sheet metal where it might have bends and things like that, but it'll put proper allocations in there so that you can create that and then hit a button and it will lay you out a flat pattern. I find this very handy for certain instances and applications, but not something, maybe put that in the back of your mind. Maybe down the road, it'll be something you'll use. And then tools, actually, this is where the 3D printing part lies. And then there's some other things where you can go through and add there's some checks for multi-part designs and more things we can discuss later on. But back to solid and back to our toolbars here. The one thing to think about with 3D printing is that everything is done on a plane. And you can kind of think of a plane as like a sheet of paper. If we grab my 3D print bed surface, you can't draw anything in 3D. You can't just start in 3D. You have to start with some sort of shape in 2D and then try and add the other dimension. You can't just draw around. Well, you kind of can in 3D sketching, but that's not the point. You need to start with something and then add a dimension to it. So as we start getting to things, we'll start on here, then we might turn the plane, but we'll get to that. Just remember, you're always trying to draw on some sort of plane. So that's what we're looking at. Again, thanks everyone for joining in. I'm trying to go through this week much more beginner focused, trying to explain everything and go through. I'm sorry if I'm not paying 100% attention to the comments, but we'll get there. So like I was saying, you need to start with some sort of drawing on some sort of plane. So the very first thing you're going to do is go up to this top part and where it says create sketch. Most things are based on sketches in Fusion 360. So we're going to go in there and click create sketch. Then you can see these 3 orange squares pop up. Now, I highly suggest that you use a mouse with a center scroll wheel that you can click down. It's very powerful and it will add a lot of functionality. When you have your center scroll wheel, you can zoom in and out by just rolling that mouse. But the other thing that you can do is you hold Shift on your keyboard and then you center click on that mouse, and that allows you to kind of freely rotate. This is why I highly suggest a mouse. It changes everything. Otherwise, you either have to come up here to this top right cube and you can kind of like drag it around to move organically. Otherwise, you can click on a certain surface and it will rotate around. So you can kind of see how things move that way. But if you have a mouse and keyboard, you'll be much faster and much more fluent at things. So tonight, I'm going to start with something that is very common in Scale RC trucks and very easy to do, a fuel cell. Fuel cell you'll see in all kinds of scale things. There's no reason you should ever have to buy a 3D printed fuel cell for one of your vehicles, because basically all you have to draw is a box. So if anyone's trying to sell you a fuel cell, you can do it yourself. Buy yourself a 3D printer, buy yourself some spools of filament, learn how to draw a fuel cell, and then just sell them to your friends to pay for that 3D printer. Like, you can get a couple $100, $250 3D printer. You can print 10 fuel cells for people and then pay for your printer. And then you're done. You've got a new tool and you know how to do something. It should be high on your list. A 3D printer is a fantastic tool to have, especially if you've spent some time to learn CAD. So, like I said, we've got these 3 orange squares here. Now what we need to do is we need to decide where we're going to start drawing. Now, a fuel cell is a box. And if you guys don't know what a should I show you what I mean when I say fuel cell? I'm just Googling fuel cell and it's funny when you Google fuel cell, the first things that pop up are RC fuel cells. So we're going to go to images. And of course we get a bunch of so here's a fuel cell. Actually, I saw one I liked better. ATL fuel cell. So here's a fuel cell in a real vehicle. It's a metal box, it's bolted in, and then it's got a fuel pump tray or a cap on top. And that's where you've got your filler neck, your fuel pumps, your fuel lines coming out, return lines, everything there. So that is what we're going to create. Now, this is what a fuel cell can look like. They come in all different shapes and sizes, but this one here, this is generally what a fuel cell looks like when it's out of the vehicle. It's got depth, but in general, it's a box. So pretty basic. Nothing too crazy, right? Everyone can get on board with that. I'm just moving my fuel cell images up. So what we're going to start with is these 3 squares is the bottom or top, either one. Then we have a left or right side and a front or back side, however you want to call it. They call it top, front, and right, I believe. We're going to select the top. So we're looking straight down if you can imagine that now. We've rotated automatically and we're looking straight down. Up at the top, we've got our sketch tools now. Since we created a new sketch, it put us into the sketch menus. Now up here, we've got line, rectangle, and let's just start with those because those are the most basic things. You can draw yourself squares, you can draw yourself lines. So fuel cell's a box. We're gonna start by selecting the rectangle and just draw a rectangle. Just draw anything, just start by drawing things. That'll be best. Now, I just hit escape. That's not necessarily something you have to do. I have a lot of force of habits, things that I've just done in drafting over 15 years. And I'm constantly just hitting escape. And I kind of do it just almost as a habit. I just constantly I'll just be sitting here and I hit it way too many times. So if you hear me doing something like that, it's likely just my habit of me mashing the escape key. And that's just to clear yourself from actually any tool selected. So if you hear me doing that, that's all I'm doing, and it's just a habit. But now we have a box. Now the box is all blue, like you can see. And when lines are blue, that means that they're not defined. It means that it doesn't actually know where that they need to be. They can kind of be anywhere. So you could grab that line and move it, and it'll do whatever you want. What we want to do, it's a good habit to do anyway, is to define everything, have things locked down. And when you do that, everything will turn black. And that's what you want. That's just good drafting practice. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can do that. I like to use something called construction lines. So you can either come up here and hit line, and that will give you the ability to draw a line. Or I'm going to select that and delete it. You can hit L on your keyboard, L for line. Now, over on the right, you can see in this menu, there's something that says construction. You can select that, and now when you draw, it's a dotted line called a construction line. Or you can hit L for line, and then X to toggle between construction on and off. You can see on the right side there how it's going on and off, on and off. So L for line, X for construction. Now, the reason I like to do this is if you see this vertical line on the left, it's got a little X that's following your cursor. And that is what's called a coincident mate, or a constraint. And that just means that if you start a line at that point, it will be locked to that line. Not in one spot, but it's just locked on that line somewhere. So if you click on two places, now you have a line that the end point cannot be dragged off that line. Instead, it will just move the whole line. That's called a constraint. That line is constrained slightly, not fully yet. What we can do though, is we can select that dot or that end point of the line, and then we're going to hit Control, which allows us to select multiple things at once. Now I've selected the end point of the line and that vertical line. And now up at the top, we've got these constraints along the top. In this triangle means midpoint. So if I click that now, it moves that everything so that the end point of the line is locked to the midpoint of that vertical line. We're going to do that to both sides right now. Clicking there, clicking the other line while holding Control and then hitting midpoint. Now, that line is locked to the midpoint of each side. Likewise, I'm going to select that construction line, hold Control, and I'm going to select this point right in the middle of the screen, which is the origin. So I'm going to select that as well, and then again, midpoint. So now that construction line is locked to the midpoint or the origin, the midpoint of the line on the origin. And that just means that now, as we move this, you can see how it moves much differently because that's just the nature of geometry. How things are constrained at this point, everything moves a little bit different. What we need to do now though is decide how big we're going to make this. And we don't have to we're not going to follow any design specifically. I'm just going to make something that's in general. We're going to make something that's like a 2-inch by 3-inch fuel cell, okay? But I like to work in metric. So Fusion comes stock or standard installation working in metric. So if you hit the D key on your keyboard, it will highlight this dimension tool at the top. Oops, I am so sorry. I'm sure that the comments have said that that's been up the whole time. I really apologize. So if you hit the D key on your keyboard, the dimension key here, the dimension at the top will say that that's ready to go. Now you can come down here and select any line basically, then add a dimension. So we're going to select this and then go up. It just pulls it up out of the way. This doesn't really matter where you click it. It could be way up here. It could be way down here. It doesn't matter. Just going to put it there. And we're going to type 125 millimeters. Wait, that's too much. 75 millimeters. That's about 3 inches. Now, if you don't like to work in millimeters, you can come up to the top, this right corner, select it, and then go to Preferences. And it'll take a second. And then down, let's see, where is it at? It is in data color. That doesn't seem right. Sorry, that's in here somewhere. Units and value display. This is where you can change down here at the bottom. You can go down to inch, pound, PSI, and that will give you standard dimensions, inches, feet, things like that. But if you're doing this for RC, I highly suggest staying in metric because you'll find that when you're measuring things, a lot of times they'll land much more on a perfect metric distance. So it's worth it if you're going to try designing around things. We're going to use D for dimension again with that line selected, and we're going to add a 50 millimeter dimension line there. So now again, holding Shift and our center mouse button, we can push and hold. Now you can kind of rotate around and see we have a 2D drawing in 3D space. But if this is all we want to put on this for now, just to keep it simple, we're going to go up to the top right and we're going to hit Finish Sketch. Now we just have a sketch. We're done drawing that. We're going to come up here on this top and we're going to use the Extrude. Extrude is the most basic function and it's very simple. We have one profile in this, which means a closed shape that we can do something with. And it automatically highlights it for us. So I'm just panning around now by holding Shift and rotating around by holding down my center button. But you can either grab this arrow and just drag, and now you can see you're creating that 3D shape, or this little dialog box that's popped up there in the center, you can just key in a dimension, like 25 millimeters, and then just hit Enter. And now you've made a box. It's just a box. But the nice thing is a fuel cell is kind of just a box. So you're about, halfway to a fuel cell, right? So at this point, we just have to decide how much detail that we want to put on something like this. Let's go, we're going to keep this, since I'm trying to go through much more step by step, I'm 18 minutes in and I've made a box. So the next step is that we need to add the top part, the thing where the fuel filler cap and the, fuel lines go in and all that. So again, we're going to go up to the top and we're going to hit Create Sketch. Now, last time we selected the top plane, which you can see those 3 highlighted squares down there again. But that top plane now is actually at the bottom of our fuel cell. So that's not where we want to draw. We want to add these items to the top part of this. So we want to select the top of this box. And you can kind of see how it puts that grid at the top. Now, you can see if I move to the side, it moves this grid around, trying to display where you're about to create a sketch plane, it's called. Or you're trying to create tell it where to put that sheet of paper so you can draw on that. So we're going to select the top of this because that's what we want. And again, it automatically rotates to be looking straight down on it like you want. Now, from this point, we need to draw the shape that we want. I have a fairly consistent way that I draw fuel cells. I've drawn a lot of fuel cells for a lot of builds, and I always make them fairly similar. It's just the style that I think is the most appropriate. Now you have certain tools up here, and we could use these tools to create this shape. Like I'm going to, just for instance, fly through one option. This is, I grabbed a rectangle, and if I draw a rectangle, say I made this 10 millimeters. I'm not saying that this is the way you should do it, so I'm going to go through an exact way. Now, to the right here, there's a fillet tool, which basically takes a sharp corner and it puts radii in it. So we selected that, and then I could select both of these lines, and then I could continue selecting all of the lines around this, and then I could do 5. So then it made, let's see, is it gonna let me? Oh, so it actually doesn't want to let me do 5mm radii because I only have 10mm total. So it would actually completely remove one side of the line. Like if I do 4.95, it will probably let me. And it didn't. Well, it's actually, this isn't the way that I would tell you to do anyway, but we could go through that further. It's just sometimes there's little things. So if we drop down this create sketch menu at the top, there's more tools, more options. The one that I like to use is called slot. So if you go to slot, then you go center to center slot. Now we're gonna draw a line based on this X axis here, but we're gonna click on one side of it and then we're gonna drag over, click on the other side, and then pull up. And you can see it creates that slot shape that it says. Now, between those two center points, there is an automatic construction line created. If you actually hover your mouse over that, you can see it, and then you can select it if you like. We're going to select it. I'm going to hold Control, and then I'm going to select the origin again. Then I'm going to go up to the top and use the midpoint constraint. And now that slot shape is locked to the center, and everything is defined a little bit better. Now, everything is still blue, you can tell. So we could actually grab, those lines, and you can just keep dragging things around. We're going to hit D for dimension. Since we're already had that line selected, we're just going to add a dimension to that. And we're going to say 6 millimeters, which that's a radius. So this is actually 12 millimeters tall through the center there. Now, we need to define how far apart these endpoints are, because right now you can see that these two lines are black, meaning that it knows how tall they have to be now, but the endpoint lines are blue still. So that's because we haven't told it how long it needs to be. We're going to hit D for dimension again, select that. I had 2 lines selected. D for dimension again, selecting one of them and dragging down. And we're going to make this, let's just say 12, like that. Actually, I want to make this a little bit bigger than 6. I'm going to crank that up to 8. So now we've drawn that simple shape. We're going to hit Finish Sketch. We're going to go back up and select Extrude again. We're going to select that piece, or that profile. I like to rotate down so that I can kind of see what I'm doing. I just like to do that. And now, if you'd like, you could just click and drag that up. But for me, I think about 1 millimeter is fine. We're going to hit Enter. Now, right now I've got this all done in one body. And for today, we're not really going to get further into bodies and things like that. We're just going to look at this design as if you're printing one item. So it's going to be, whatever you're drawing here would be one piece you would 3D print entirely. It's not going to be in hollow box or an empty box or anything like that. It's just going to be what it is. So we've done that part. Now let's add the filler cap, for instance. Oh, is my mic? My audio is crackling. Let's see. I'm going to, 1 second. Okay, 1 second. We're going to fix it.